Stay tuned for Truckers Life Radio, coming up next on tncradio.live.
Reverse Gears moved to Thursdays at 8, 7 Central on the Travel Network channel, tncradio.live. You're invited to ride through the stories of and music that made the memory makers we call the soundtrack of life at our new time, 8, 7 Central, Thursdays on tncradio.live.
Hello and welcome to tncradio.live. This is Truckers Life Radio. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio on tncradio.live. I'm your host, Ron Frazier, and my guest today is Kelly Mack McCoy. Kelly is a semi-retired truck driver turned author. He spent most of his career, as I understand it, behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, traveling throughout the 48 states. And in that process, he gained a lifetime of material for his books, the first of which is Rough Way to the Highway, which is the first in a series of a number of novels. And as I understand it, now I'll ask him when we talk with him, but I understand he's also working on a devotional. Kelly lives with his wife, Emily, and their two Yorkies in Spring Branch, Texas. So we have another Texan on the line with us today. So, Kelly, we are glad to have you here. I shared just a brief outline of you, but share your story with us.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks for having me on. And I started driving a truck back in 1974, and I'll let your listeners do the math, and they can determine how old I am now. I was 21 years of age then, and that was the minimum requirement then and is now in order to drive over the road across state lines. And so I pretty much drove everything you can think of and anything under the sun during that time. And I'm still driving, part-time and trying to work it in with all my writing. The writing came in, I was something I've had in my heart since I was a kid and just didn't follow through with. And, until I finally was moved. And I'll tell you that story, a little bit later, how I came to write my first novel and these other books. But I come from a rather rough background, I would say. It's a very rough background. My dad was an alcoholic and he stayed drunk. I always tell that story, and it's true. He stayed drunk for 25 years straight. And my mom was in and out of mental institutions during my years growing up. So you can imagine what kind of a fun household I grew up in. So the way that I got into trucking was that it was just a way to escape, and it was poor boy's way of seeing the world. So here I am.
Well, let's talk a little bit. It sounds like, Kelly, it sounds like it was a life full of difficulties and disappointments, but, tell me a little bit about what God has brought you through, because obviously you couldn't have got through this on your own. Where did God come into play in your life?
Amen. Very true. As I said, the road was mainly a way of escape to me. And when I was a kid, and this is a true story, my goal, or when I grew up, was to survive until adulthood. And then I would, live my life, and maybe things would go my way. But as you know, life just doesn't work that way. So when I got out there on the road, I repeated some of the very same mistakes that I, learned growing up. And so I, got myself into various kind of difficulties and never got arrested. Thank God. Could have easily have done that though. And it wasn't until I was 31 years of age, I'd already been driving for 10 years, when I was introduced to the Lord, and I was very hardened person, you know, and in the sense that I was very convinced in what I believe. I was very resistant to the gospel, but I had it presented to me in a way that there was no denying, and all my, you know, intellectual opposition to it just faded away. And I came to know the Lord at 31 years of age, and of course that radically changed my life. I radically received the Lord from that point on, and I continued to drive a truck, you know, as I said, up till now. And the writing part is something that I've always had in my heart since I was a little kid. But, you know, back in the neighborhood I grew up in, you know, nobody became a writer. You didn't even think about those kind of things, or really any kind of you know, white collar job. So I just kind of put that in on the back burner until 3 years ago when Roughly the Highway came out, and that has changed my life radically also. And I have one of the reasons, or I guess the main reason for even writing the book, is I have a heart for reaching the lost and those in the trucking industry especially, who will be moved by the story. But it's written in such a way, and I very carefully did this throughout the writing of the novel. It's written in such a way that an unbeliever can pick it up and go through the whole novel and you know, be entertained and see it and receive its message at the same time, you know, in a way that he or she might not otherwise.
Kelly, how did you survive those 10 years? You said you started when you were 21. You didn't come to know the Lord till you were 31, or at least introduced to him at that point. What kept you afloat, especially in light of your family background, because typically that just sinks most people? What kept you afloat for those 10 years?
That's a good question, Ron. I think the Lord obviously had his hand on me from the time I was a kid, and he kept me alive literally until I could, until I came to know him. I had so many things happen to him where I can look back and see that God has been drawing me to him, and I was moved, but I was so hardened that I just resisted his call until, you know, those 10 years of being on the road were over. And here in one of my blogs, I share the story of when I was 21 years old, and this is typical of the trucking industry. Here I was 21 years old, less than a year's experience, and I was driving team with a driver who had less experience than I did, and I was driving down the Grapevine Grade in California. I just had my brakes adjusted before I took it, you know, top the summit there, and only to discover on the other side that I had no brakes, no trailer brakes whatsoever going down that hill, and you know, no engine brakes either. So my brakes became overheated. They were smoking, and, you know, I was just a big old ball of smoke going down the mountain. And I determined at that time that I was just going to drive the truck off the side of the mountain, because when you get down to the bottom of the hill there's a curve, and I knew that there was no way that I was going to make it around that curve, you know, with the upright. So I determined I was going to drive off the side of the mountain, and I was going to end my life and obviously the life of my co-driver. Didn't know anything about what was going on, but the last thing that I did is I pulled the parking brake. Last thing I knew to do. And as your listeners know, there's a bit of a delay in an air brake system before they engage, and it's a very short amount of time, but when you're in that situation, it seems like it's an eternity. And, I say at the end of that blog, in a sense, that was an eternity, because that was the only thing that kept me on, in time, and kept me from entering eternity. God obviously had more planned for me. I was able to, the brakes engaged, they pull over and stop, and had a driver pull over behind me, and that's the difference between now and then. As soon as I would no sooner stop my truck than I had somebody pull up behind me, another trucker, see what was wrong, and we both called underneath the trailer. It turned out that mechanic had turned the brakes all the way out in the wrong direction, so I had zero brakes. And me being young and stupid, I never stopped. I never thought to pull over in the mandatory brake check. After all, I just had the brakes adjusted, so bothered.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kelly.
No, you go ahead.
Isn't it amazing to understand that when God has a plan and purpose for our lives, there is nothing that can happen to us, even when we're an unbeliever, until God chooses that. And so, that story is a miracle of God, and we want to talk more about. We've got to go to a break, but this is exciting. It's exciting to hear how God is working in your life. So we'll go to break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Kelly Mack McCoy.
Join Tom Kelly and the rest of the team each day on the Morning Grind. Then stay tuned for an encore presentation of last night's Landline Now. Weekdays on TNCRadio.live.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on TNCRadio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on TNCRadio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio on TNCRadio.live. We've been talking with Kelly Mack McCoy, and Kelly has been sharing just an amazing story with us. Kelly is an author, as we talked about a little bit ago, but we want to talk a little more about that right now. And we want to talk about a book you wrote called Rough Way to the Highway. I really would love to hear what was the motivation behind that particular book, and where it's going from here. And we know that you wanted to be an author. That was a lifelong kind of dream for you. But let's talk about you being an author. Kelly, tell us about your book.
Well, I'll go back to the beginning, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, and that is, it's, as you just said, it's something that I had in my heart since I was a kid. But, once again, in my kind of neighborhood and background, that's not something you actually did. So that's the kind of self-defeating attitude that we have. We just can't believe that we can do it, so therefore it doesn't happen. But I knew, this was in my heart, again, since I was a kid. And the way that I knew that I could write is that I loved then, and I still love now, to go to bookstores. I love to go to these big, huge bookstores like Barnes & Noble and that kind of store, and just to, browse the aisles, pick up books here and there, and look at them, open it up, and read a segment of it. And sometimes I would be absolutely blown away by the prose, and I would think that there was no way that I would ever be able to write like that. And then I go down the aisle and I pick up another book and I look at it and I think, this is just really bad. And so I knew that if a book like that, as bad as it was, could get on the shelf in a big bookstore like that, then there is no reason I wouldn't be able to do it as well. And that is really the way that I knew that I could write from the very beginning. But again, I didn't, as your listeners can relate to. Trucking tends to be an all-consuming patient, and plus, being married and have kids and that kind of thing. It's just, I never took the time to do it.
Kelly,
Go.
Kelly, I want to interrupt you for a minute just because you made really an interesting point. Often in our lives, we go about life with a heart's desire like you had and have to be an author, to write, but the devil tends to whisper in our ears that, no, you can't do that. You're not good enough. And he does that for a lot of things, but the reality is we can sometimes choose to believe the lie and never fulfill a purpose that God has for us in our lives. So, I'm sure that you would challenge our listeners to say, hey, if you've got a desire, if God's laid something on your heart, don't believe the lie. Go do it because God's called you to do it. Well, tell us about.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the key, is to just go out there and do it. I mean, I especially being an author, I see that all the time with people wanting to write books. Not only truckers, there's a number of them that have amazing stories, but they don't step out and do it. They number one, just like me, they don't think they can. And number two, when you step out there and face like that, you're going to get a lot of criticism. You're going to get a lot of criticism. Especially when you enter the big bad world of publishing, and it just goes with the territory. But that's true of so many things in life. You just have to get out there and do it. And I encourage, as you just said, I encourage anybody who wants to write or do anything else, calling it God's place on your life, please just step out there and do it.
Kelly, you wrote the book Rough Way to the Highway, and it's a story about Pastor Robert Lee McCoy, who, as I understand it, resigns from his church in Texas, and after the murder of his wife, and he's trying to find his way forward. Where did the motivation for that story come from?
Well, it's something that I had in the back of my mind for quite some time, to write a series of novels about a truck driver on the road, because I knew there'd be a lot of it. So many people love trucking. You can go back to the Smoking the Bandit and all that kind of stuff. People just love it. It's not just within the trucking industry. But after I got laid off from the trucking job that I had for a number of years, I had enough time built up to take a little pension, which I did. And when I did that, I decided I was going to pursue my writing career seriously. And so I joined a little Christian writers group near my home in San Antonio. And at that writers group, I met a gentleman by the name of John Floyd Mills. John was a former writer of the old, now defunct San Antonio Light newspaper. And he liked my writing style. He wanted to partner with me in this project and write a story about a pastor who became a trucker and hit the road after his wife's death. And so that was, just like my vision. So we partnered together, but we never wrote the novel because our writing style was just radically different. And John went on to write 2 novels of his own, and I took off with this project, Rough Way to the Highway, what would become Rough Way to the Highway. And I say I took off with it. What really happened is I kind of stumbled and fell, and just could not get the project going. And until I was finally motivated to see it through to completion and publication. And the motivating factor there was the death of John Floyd Mills. he died unexpectedly at a relatively young age. And, I thought, both to honor him and that brings home the fact, your own mortality, our own mortality. We're not going to live forever. And that kind of goes back to what you said earlier about, people being motivated to follow their dreams now, because we may not have another opportunity. But that's what motivated me to finish and see it through to publication.
Well, it's you shared a bit earlier, and we'll probably have to pick this up after our second break here, but you shared a little bit about the difficult struggles in the world of publishing. And you just shared about a struggle. Was that the most difficult struggle you faced in launching your writing career? Or were there other things that maybe brought you to a point of saying, I'm not sure I'm supposed to do this?
Well, that was a large part of it. But again, it was the lack of belief in myself and that I could even do this. Belonging to a writers group helped tremendously because I received, reinforcement. Hey Kelly, you're a good writer. You really need to pursue that, and I think that that helps tremendously. We need to, I think, surround ourselves with positive people. To get this done. You're never really going. I don't think any of us are ever really going to be able to fulfill our dreams unless we have that.
Tell me a little bit, Kelly, about the next series of books that are coming out for you.
Right now, the Roughway the Highway is a completely standalone novel. But it is meant to be a 3-part series, and we'll get into that. There's so many things that have gone, that have happened with Roughway the Highway, including the interest of a movie producer. And that sounds like a bigger deal than it is, because you have to get a screenwriter, and then you have to get have a few $1 million for somebody to step forward and invest in that. But a lot of this miraculous things have happened. So I currently have another totally unrelated book that's with a publisher. It is a devotional, and the motivation for that one came from all the craziness that's happened in the last couple of years, and with all the the devastation, the suicide, drug addiction, all that, that's increased many times over in the last couple of years. And it's the devotional is targeted towards those who are away from home, travel for a living. Obviously, truck drivers being the primary target audience, but anybody who's away from home, away from church home, and so forth. And that's in the works with the publisher, and that's kind of a long process. So I can't give you a publication date on that one.
Well, let's go to break, Tom. Or Kelly, let's go to break, and we'll pick this up because you hit an interesting point. But we'll pick it up when we get back from break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey drivers, did you hear music on tncradio.live that you really liked? Or maybe you heard us interview an author of a book you'd like to read or listen to. You can get the books, music, and other products you hear about by going to our website at www.tncradio.live and clicking on the shopping cart.
Ride with the Women Road Warriors Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. This is Ron Frazier, your host. I'm speaking with Kelly Mack McCoy, and Kelly is an author. We've been talking about Roughway to the Highway, which has been his book that he published, and now we're talking a little bit about the devotional that he's got coming out, and the effect that that devotional we hope will have on the driving community. Kelly, the truck stops are changing. and the trucking industry is struggling to put drivers on the road. And you shared a little bit about what the pandemic has done. It has created negativity, it's created anxiety, it's created suicidal issues, marital issues that were already, pretty prevalent before the pandemic, but the pandemic has just increased the number of those that we now see. What I want to ask you is, how has God used you during these difficult times that has been caused by the pandemic? How has He used you as a believer, as a driver, as an author? Share a little bit about that with us.
Well, so many of your listeners, all of your listeners, our lives were altered in ways that we couldn't imagine, with the pandemic. And I, had my book published, and things were going pretty well. I was doing a lot of book signings, and it was taking off pretty well. And then the pandemic hit. That was kind of the end of that for a while. There's no more book signings, no more public events or any of that. And so I planned on my next book being a sequel to Roughway the Highway, and I was out on the road during this time, and I did do, prior to the pandemic, I did do some signings, around the country, and made a lot of connections. But as time went on, and I began to just see all the devastation around me that's caused by the pandemic, and I just had a heart for doing what I could, I guess you could say, to give people hope through all this. And our hope, as you know, lies in God alone. And that is where our focus needs to be through all this. Because, the devotion is really a reminder that we are all sojourners through this life. This is not our permanent home. With all the, challenges we face, I think that's one of the things that I have to remind myself of when I'm going through a particular trying time. But hey, this is not going to last forever. It's not my permanent home. So I'm able to step back from it a little bit and see, how God is working through all of this. And so that's where the motivation came from for that book.
Kelly, would it be fair to say that your efforts are bringing more attention to the trucking community as to who God is and what He desires for each one of us? I know that there are a number of Christian drivers out there, and many who may listen to this program, that have struggled over the past to understand how they can be an advocate for Jesus Christ on the road. The trucking community is not looked at in a positive light, and we in the industry and our organization especially is trying to change that perspective by the general community. But there are drivers out there who are born again, and I'm sure some of you guys and women are listening to us tonight that really have struggled in the past to know how to represent God while they are driving. What would you say to them?
Well, it is a challenge that we all face out there, and one of the good things today is that there is, with all its issues, there's the internet, and we're in social media, and we're all interconnected in ways that we weren't before. And I often felt that I was alone out there. Many of your listeners do. We go through these struggles ourselves, and now there are so many other outlets, such as your ministry, and that reaches out to so many of those people. But so many of us in the past were not aware of those things. And my goal has certainly been to encourage believers to, live out their faith in the world, on that truck, in that truck of theirs, and everywhere they go, and to share Christ with others. And, your ministry and others can get them resources to help them do that.
How do you see yourself as an advocate for God to the trucking community, Kelly? How do you see yourself doing God's work as you go along? Your books are there, that's true. They've got that availability. They've got a lot of things they can do. But you personally, how do you see yourself as an advocate for God?
Well, one of the things I'm attempting to do, Ron, is to, not only provide an outlet for, believers to share their faith and encourage believers out there on the road, but also to give a more positive image to truck drivers outside the industry. I have a lot of connections, of believers I've developed over the years who are outside the industry, and there's a lot of fascination with the industry, and along with a lot of negativity. But I'm not going to focus on the negativity. We know it's all there. But I am through my website, through my social media, attempting to provide an outlet for that, for a better understanding of what truckers go through, for the general public to have an understanding of what truckers go through, and also just believers to realize that are outside the industry, to realize there are a lot of Christians or brothers and sisters in the industry, and I like to make that connection so we can all our part in the body of Christ.
I think you hit the nail on the head. We started a little while ago, and we're part of a initiative from our organization called the International Christian Trucking Association, because among other things, we found that not only were we evangelizing, but the bigger issue we had was that we were not meeting the needs of the Christian drivers. And so that really opened our eyes and allowed us to see ways that we could change that. But for years, what Christian drivers have told us is that they have felt just all alone, and they were struggling in their walk with God. They were struggling in their devotional time. And for some, that still may be true because they haven't found community. They haven't found a way to come together with other brothers and sisters in Christ. So, what you are doing and trying to do, it's my prayer, it's our organizational's prayer, that there are other drivers out there who would hear this program and understand they have a part to play. As Christian brothers and sisters in Christ, they have a part to play in drawing the Christian drivers and even the company owners together to pray, to give a better view and vision of what this industry is like, to understand that we have grandmothers and we have fathers and we have wives and we have sons and daughters who are all driving trucks. And it's not just, the negativity that most people would think it is. We've got some great people behind the wheel, and so we want to encourage them. But right now, we need to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk with Kelly about how you can connect with him. If there's something that you want to share or you want to make contact to have Kelly come speak at one of your events, you're going to be able to do that. We're going to give you that contact information. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network Show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Put it in reverse gear for the Memory Makers Thursdays at 8, 7 Central on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. We're here with Kelly Mack McCoy, and Kelly has been sharing about his life and about his book. And I'm sure that many of our listeners who have heard his story might have a question, Kelly, as to how they can get a hold of you. So what I'm going to ask you is, number one, what do you see in the future for truckers in the trucking industry? And if drivers and company owners who are listening to this program want to get involved with you or your ministry or the work that you're doing, or just invite you to come speak, how do they do that?
Well, one of the advantages, Ron, of having a distinctive name is that I'm easy to find. You can just go and Google Kelly Mack McCoy and all kinds of things will come up. You can contact me through my website, which is named kellymackmccoy.com. My Facebook page, Kelly Mack McCoy author. Those two are the main avenues for contacting me. I can be contacted through email. And guess what that email is? kellymackmccoy@gmail or Yahoo. And so you, again, just get on there and you can contact me through any of those resources. You can get online and share some of these things from my Facebook page or Instagram. I haven't even mentioned, I also have a ghostwriting project going on, and that book will probably be out after my devotional, but it is also related to the trucking industry and other believers who are sharing their story. I have a lot of books in me, and it's just probably the Lord gives me enough time on this earth to do it. So any individuals or trucking company executives or owners who would like to contact me, they do it through one of those.
Well, that is super. We want the listening audience to know that Kelly has agreed to write for our Highway News magazine, TFC Global's Highway News magazine that goes out every month to drivers, to trucking companies, to truck stops, to hotels, to restaurants. He has been gracious to say he will write as much as he can when he can. And so you can see some of his writing in the magazine. You can also see some of his blogs that we will be posting there. And if you want to know more about Kelly, or there's something you didn't get, you can reach us at info@tfcglobal.org, and we'd be happy to make a connect for you. So that's great, Kelly. You've got a lot of good resource material that I'm sure our listeners should and could take advantage of. Kelly, what do you see happening in the trucking industry, and how do you see the pandemic having changed the ability for ministries like ours and the work you do to reach the drivers with the gospel of Jesus Christ, with the good news of Jesus Christ?
Well, as you've already alluded to, I mean, there have been radical changes within the industry in the last few years. One of the jobs I had recently was in driving a reefer, and doing that especially, you run into little mini United Nations at many of the places at many of the shippers and receivers. And one of the things I also did before I embarked on that job, I was a truck driver instructor sometime at a truck driving school, and that was one of the things I took on to allow me a little bit more time to write. But again, it was like a mini United Nations, and people would not believe the stories that came out of there. I mean, I had people literally from all over the world, many of whom could barely speak English, and they have some remarkable stories. I had one gentleman who had not one but two PhDs who was going through the trucking school. So, again, it's changing radically, but that is, an even greater mission field. So we're reaching people not only in America, but from all over the world, because those people have family, in disparate places all over the world. I mean, they're from Korea, Colombia, from Africa, Russia, from all over the world. And so that just greatly expands our outreach when we reach those individuals of Christ, because so many of them come from, probably the majority of them come from non-Christian environments. And so that we can reach people all over the world. Gospel.
I know, Kelly, that we have been challenged because the driving culture, the driving and the ethnicity of the drivers has changed, so that has driven us to various language difficulties in trying to put out resources that would cover the gambit of the drivers we now see in the field. And so I'm sure as an author, that's got to have some impact on you as well, with thinking about how does my book impact as many people as possible in light of the little United Nation kind of thing that you're talking about. How have you reflected on that? I mean, do you have any thoughts as to what you might do in the future?
Well, if I can tell a little quick story that relates to that, one of the other great things about technology is that, you can communicate with anybody around the world if they speak any kind of major language just through Google Translate or one of the other, translating devices out there. I actually met a gentleman at a book signing event in Laredo, Texas, and he bought one of my books, and it turned out he did not speak English or barely spoke English, but he was driving a truck sharing his story around the country, and he was from Kyrgyzstan of all places, and he had got on the wrong side of politics there, and so he had received asylum in America. But I learned all this. I was able to, communicate with him through our phones. He spoke. He also spoke Russian, so he was speaking Russian and translating it to English. I was speaking English, translating it to Russian, and I learned his whole story. So that led to a connection, halfway around the world in Kyrgyzstan, and to another lady who speaks 4 different languages. So when you just step into that, just miraculous things happen. A whole new world is opened up to you.
Yeah, and isn't it great that we are not limited? Even by our own knowledge, God provides wisdom. When we lack it, He provides pathways for us to do ministry. He allows us to see opportunities that we may never have seen before, as to ways that we can reach out and care for the driver, the professional driver, and their family. We look at the issue of having language barriers, but God is more than able. And so when we rest in that, we can know that God will allow His word to go forth. So, Kelly, it's just been a wonderful time. We've been blessed to have you and privileged to have you on the program today. Kelly, is there one last thing in the minute and a half we have left that you would want to share with those who are listening to this program? One thing that you would want to give them as a takeaway?
Yes, and there's many ways that you can share Christ to others. I'll go back real quick to the school I was in. I had a student spoke almost no English. He was from Korea, old school, yes sir, no sir. He understood everything that I was saying just by looking at me. And he passed his test with flying colors just by watching me. You can relate that to your spiritual life. There's people out there watching you. They don't necessarily have to say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus is wonderful, but they see it in you. And they'll often come to Christ just because of your testimony. Without a word.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for being part of our program tonight. And we look forward to talking to you again. And by that time, there may be new things on the that you have done as far as your authoring and as far as what you're doing for the Lord. So we look forward to speaking with you again. And to our listeners, we hope you have enjoyed this time. And again, if you want to reach out to Kelly Mack McCoy, he has given you multiple ways of doing that. So thanks again, Kelly, and thanks again to our listeners. And we look forward to our next program.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
For the latest in ride-sharing gig economy news, visit uberliftdrivers.com. That's uberliftdrivers.com. So, hi, this is Tom Kelly with TNCRadio.live. Very exciting to have Kelly Mack McCoy on with us today, talking about his book, Rough Way to the Highway. The Midwest Book Review from Amazon says a compulsive page-turner of a read from cover to cover. Rough Way to the Highway is an extraordinary novel, one that will linger in the mind and memory long after the book has been finished and set back upon the shelf. Let's listen for just a moment to an example of the audiobook available for all of you from Amazon.com.
Mack parked his rig at the truck stop south of Chicago, hopped out, and walked over to the designated meeting location under a broken security light. A man with a trench coat approached, with head bowed. The man's fedora cast a long shadow over his face. The man stopped before Mack and scanned the lot.
"Mr. McLean?"
His voice was like run-over gravel, spoken almost in a whisper. Mack looked about the lot and spoke in a matching tone. "Yes, sir." The man lowered his hat across his brow before raising his head to reveal his face for the first time. Although still obscured by shadows, his firm features could now be seen. He placed his hands to either side of Mack's torso. A slight grin came to form on his face as he eyed Mack and spoke once more.
"Just a precaution."
Mack returned the man's grin as he lifted his arms. "I understand." After patting Mack down, the man took a small step back.
"You're not carrying?"
"No, sir."
"Not even in your truck?"
"No, sir."
"Why not?"
Mack shrugged. "Just never thought I needed to carry a weapon." The man motioned his head toward Mack's truck.
"And the hitchhiker, is he still with you?"
Mack stared at the agent in silence for some time before answering. He's asleep in the bunk, but he doesn't have a weapon either."
"We haven't been able to confirm the identity of your passenger. Maybe he hasn't been completely honest with you about his history. You know, these men
are all a bunch of con artists."
"Yes, sir."
"Well, the hitchhiker saved my life. If not for him, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you now."
"In any case, you might want to rethink the weapon thing, Mr. McLean."
Just call me Mack."
"I'm sorry, sir, but I like the old-fashioned formalities. If something happens to you..."
Mack nodded. "So what should I call you then, Mr. Spook?" The man shook his head.
That's the CIA, Mr. McLean. They have the spooks.
Well, you know who didn't tell me your name.
Just call me G-Man.
G-Man?
Yes, sir. There are a lot of bad guys out there. That's why I say you may want to rethink the weapon thing.
Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Tell us how we can get a copy of your book.
Well, the book, as they say, is available anywhere books are sold. And again, you can look it up on Amazon, through my name or through the title, Roughway of the Highway, and any other place books are sold online, and are also available in any bookstore. You can order it if it's not already on the shelf.
And I'm already curious about who the hitchhiker is, but I guess that's something we'll have to listen to the book to find out, huh?
Amen.
All right.
And then you'll still wonder.
They will still wonder. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kelly, and it's been a pleasure to have you on with us on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.